Hi guys, welcome to my channel. Thanks for tuning in for episode 2 of How Dance Healed Me. My name's Jo Freeman. I'm a professional dancer, movement director, choreographer, teacher, mental health researcher, all of the things that collaborate performance and artistry to mental health and mental health awareness. So in this episode, we are going to be talking about my chronic back pain that I've lived with for 11 years now, and I will be going through a little bit about what I do day to day to help monitor that, to hopefully give you some advice and ease some of you who potentially live with any kind of chronic pain, or in my case, chronic back pain. So without further ado, here is episode 2, living with chronic pain and what I do in a day. So to start off, it is 2013. I have been attending Rambert School for ballet and contemporary dance in London. I was very fortunate to get a place there when I was so young, and the training was very intense. Naturally, being a professional full-time school, you wouldn't expect anything less. However, I was struggling with some back issues. My back was very, very mobile. I was hyper flexible in not only my spine, but also my shoulders, my joints, my hips as well were hyper flexible. So there was a lot of instability, and there was a lot of strength that I had to build up that I wasn't actually aware of. And slowly through the school did they come to recognize that I did actually need to have a lot more sort of focused training on strength that I initially thought I'd readily get through ballet, through contemporary, through other sort of body conditioning classes that we did have. So yeah, it was a big eye-opener to start with. I think I started first year, the first term was quite pain-free, and then towards Christmas it definitely became apparent that there was an issue there. So I was actually struggling from transverse pars stress fractures, which I will show you in a minute what that means on a little diagram. And basically this meant that the spinal column was actually really unstable, and it was in my lower spine, so in the last vertebrae called the L5 of the lumbar spine, which is the last 5 vertebrae. As you can imagine, I've been through a little bit of research on this. From way back then, I did have to do quite a lot of research in my back anatomy. So my the last vertebrae in my spine was super weak. So as you can see here on this image, the spinal column is made up of the vertebrae, obviously. On the right hand side, that is it horizontally. Now the image on the left shows the vision from the back. So this is just if you're looking towards the back of the spine, it's just easier to see those two transverse process nodules of the spine bone, and I have sort of drawn in 2 cracks there to show you where my stress fractures were. I did actually have one on each side, so that meant that the spinal column there was really weak, and it was actually collapsing. Now this would have meant that my hip discs eventually would have ruptured, and I probably wouldn't have been able to walk. So it was very scary stuff going through at sort of 17, especially due to the fact that I was in pain for about 1.5 years before I was fully diagnosed. I think I had about 3 x-rays, 4 CT scans and 2 MRIs before they finally discovered it. And actually it was due to an x-ray that they took from a bird's eye view, so down sort of the center of my head, down the column of my spine. So yeah, if you are struggling with a diagnosis, then I would keep continuing with different forms and methods of scans and opinions until you do really find the right one, because obviously I did need surgery after this, and it would have been quite tragic and traumatic had that not been discovered. So the surgery actually was pretty straightforward, my surgeon said. I was very lucky that I enrolled in getting some private healthcare just before I started my full-time school. It was my mother's idea, thank you so much, Mum, because it obviously helped me a massive load. I think I paid about £25 a month, and I was able to get referrals, to get physio, to get surgery, which I definitely wouldn't have been able to pay for otherwise. So if you are going into a full-time school, it's so not necessary, and I think they're a lot better now at getting people diagnosed and really listening to the students and trying to figure things out. But just for where I was at that time, I was super lucky that I did have private healthcare. So the surgery, as you'll see in this image, was called a bilateral lysis L5 repair. It was actually keyhole surgery, so it meant they slit the lower part of my back, just where the L5 was, and they thread in sort of needles and prongs to help drill in two bolts into my spine to help sort of structurally hold me up, which you will see in this image here. So you can see the two bolts there with going straight through the cracks, and that is currently what I have in my L5. So obviously the recovery for this is very, very long, and I went through all the ups and downs. I went through depression at home. I had to be, I was bedbound for about a week, and then I couldn't go up and down stairs for another few weeks. So my mum had to cater for me basically with food and everything and support me, which I'm so grateful she did. However, I was very, very isolated in a little town in Hertfordshire, and I had no friends around me, and only my sisters sort of coming and going from school and their activities. So yeah, I did have a lot of a mental battle and struggle then, which I don't think fully left me until very recently. It was sort of my first big discovering of what depression was and anxiety was, but I was so young. I had the surgery just before my 18th birthday, so yeah, my big 18th was on crutches and being unable to sort of, you know, socialise in that dynamic. So it was a very difficult time, but I am here to just tell you, now that I've managed to get through it, now that I've managed to discover how I can sort of dance again and move again, what that is like and what that means for me, and my mental health, of course, is always worth mentioning as well. So I think the main things to take away for me from living with chronic back pain is just to move. I've been forced to move, or I felt like I forced myself to move because I've associated so strongly with being a dancer. And so even if I have been in absolute pain or agony, I have wanted and tried to do something, and that more often than not, surprisingly, has resulted in less pain. Not even if it wasn't less pain, it was a shift of pain, it was a transition, and that allowed me to understand whether it was more muscular, whether it was more joint orientated, whether it was more surgery orientated, and more often than not, it was constantly fluctuating between the three, which it does now daily, sometimes hourly, depending on so many different things. So anyone who is really struggling with chronic pain, I would just encourage you to move just once a day, whatever that is, even if that's just, you know, walking or doing, you know, stretching a different part of the body that isn't even related to where your chronic pain is. A lot of the time, if I did have issues with my back, you know, I just focus on my arms, or, you know, I do some easy, you know, squats and things for my legs and for other areas, just to keep that blood circulation going, because again, that would influence my back even in a subtle way, which would shift, and then I could decipher whether again I needed to, you know, stretch out more or focus on strengthening more, and it really would help me move forward. So with that moving forward, obviously my mood and my mental health has always been heavily affected by pain. As many people know who live with chronic pain, if you are in pain every day, you learn to deal with it, you learn to subdue a lot of pain, and therefore you associate that with different emotions as well. You learn to suppress certain emotions, which obviously can then spiral you down to, getting into worse mental health issues. So by moving, I was able to shift my pain, and therefore my mood would shift into more of a curiosity, more of a okay, how does this make me feel, other than when I was just stiff and stuck 2 minutes ago. So I'm just going to go through a little bit of what I do day to day to help me shift those patterns, shift those cycles, so I don't feel like I'm stuck, because when you do, it's a very, very quick path to feeling that sort of depression, when you feel like helpless because you've just stayed in the same state for so long. So here I'm going to show you a little bit of a time lapse of my morning routine in yoga. This was this morning. So I am on my moon cycle, so I'm having my period this morning, and I wanted to do a lot of a different yoga practice. So it's very easy, very soft. There's a lot of just child poses here. There's a lot of breathing, there's a lot of massaging, there's a lot of stretching, but again, you can see I'm using a pillow to really help me feel held and help me feel comfortable. Nothing is really straining here. So at the end here, you'll see I'm just kind of going ad hoc. Most of the time I do a little bit of yoga, 10, even 15 minutes, and then I'll do my own thing. I'll do some twists, I'll do some easy cycling on my back, I'll do some other stretching. And the yoga primarily is just to get me into the mood of motion. And then once I'm there, I can feel, my body might need this more, or might need this more, or actually might not want to do the whole yoga practice, and I'll just stop the class and I'll do my own thing. So it's really just about getting yourself up and motivated to move, and then you obviously have the autonomy to do what you like with that. And it honestly is life-changing doing this once a day. If I don't do this once a day, I'm not only stiff physically, I also emotionally always have in the back of my mind, I'm in pain. That means, something's wrong. That means that I've got to overachieve. And so it really can get to my mindset. So moving in the morning, I really, really value. And lastly, I'll say, on the back of something I have mentioned, which is stress. So if I am stressed, my body is tense, like most people are when they're stressed. And I would say my number one advice for people living with chronic pain, and something that I have found the most valuable, has been stress management, if not eradication, which is possible. And these have been practices such as meditation, such as mindfulness, such as self-care and positive self-talk. There are so many different ways you can start to think about how stress can be eradicated or even minimized slightly, and it just goes hand in hand with managing pain. So I really would recommend looking into that if you are, like me, living with chronic pain. Now, there are just two more things I want to mention before I leave this episode, and one of them that has really, really helped me in my pain has been getting out in nature. Now, getting out in nature has really helped my mental health, helps me with mindfulness, helps me with staying present and staying grounded and not being anxious about my pain and having a good relationship with it. So I've just got here some images of the most amazing scenery that I've seen recently. I went on a holiday with my mother to Northumberland, and it was honestly so beautiful. I felt such at peace there. You can see, hopefully, even with these images, a sense of sort of clarity, a sense of, different perspective of coming away from things. So that's definitely something I would really recommend. And the second thing I'm going to mention to end this episode is dance. Now, where was that? It featured a little bit when I was speaking about movement. Obviously, that helped me with my stretching and with my mobility in the morning. But sometimes we feel a little bit, restricted or regimented. It's more like a routine thing that we have to do, tick off a box. And that's sometimes not what movement is about. Movement is about having fun. So my final recommendation, advice, and also reflection on what has really, really healed me has been dancing. And this is literally me just grooving about, moving in my own space, in my own home, and not having anyone sort of be around me to feel self-conscious. And that's exactly what I really want to help motivate you to do. Put on a song that makes you feel really, really uplifted, that makes you want to dance, and just do it. So without further ado, this is me just having fun. And funnily enough, the most pain-free I feel is after doing this. Take a look.